Good morning. My name is Pamela Welle. I'm married to that really handsome guy who does the, baby there. I'm one of the co-pastors here too. There's endless co-pastors. I wore this dress today because I figured that if you got bored listening to me, then you could just look at the dress and pretend like I was like a zebra walking around, and that would be interesting, right? So I'm going to do my life so far. We started this about 3 years ago because I don't know about you, but I've always found it so inspiring to hear about other people's lives and how God has worked through their lives, and I love that. So we started doing a series about that for about 3 years ago, and we do it a number of times a year. And we're actually going to do one at the sort of like the middle of April, I think, next. So if you want to do my life so far, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. So I wish I could say that I used to be part of the Hell's Motorcycle Club before I became a Christian, but that is not true. But you've got to admit that it's a lot more interesting the fact that I was born into a middle-class family, decided to become a Christian at an early age. I've never been drunk. I've never shoplifted. I've only ever had sex with my husband. I was such a sucky kid. I finally tried smoking when I was 55 years old because I thought it was so sad that people say, "Do you used to smoke?" I'm like, "No, I'm never even trying a cigarette." So I thought I should try one so I didn't have to say that anymore. How was it? I didn't inhale. I entitled this sermon, "Rebel with a Cause." So what am I rebelling against? Not believing in myself. I read, you can see our family's big on quotes. I read a quote recently that said, "In a society that profits from your self-doubt, believing in yourself is a rebellious act." I'm going to read that again. In a society that profits from your self-doubt, believing in yourself is a rebellious act. So that's kind of how I'm going to try and rebel. I'm going to believe in myself. Why this should be so difficult, I really don't understand. It's taken me 60 odd years to get to the place of feeling like I might be an okay human being. So just for you, I'm going to take my best guess at how I got this way and how God has been loving me into moving beyond my insecurities. I was born in a well-to-do family. My dad was a doctor. I was well taken care of. I liked going to school. I was good at school. I had lots of friends. I'm nice. Other people seem to find me agreeable. So why shouldn't I like myself? Like I said, I'm not entirely clear about that. What happened to me, presumably in my childhood, that made me feel this way? My parents were never unkind to me, but they weren't particularly interested in me as a child either. I thought about this quite a bit and talked to my other 3 siblings about it, and we agree that Mom and Dad were just not that interested in who we were as people when we were children. They were when we were adults, but not when we were children. And they just didn't enjoy spending time with us that much when we were young. We were never neglected in our physical needs. It was more like we were kind of in the way of the stuff that they wanted to do in life. What did they want to do? Mostly my parents wanted to organize and participate in spiritual events. They were always at church. In the 70s, actually, they had these praise meetings at our house where 100 people would come. Remember, we had the big house. 100 people would come, and there would be a speaker, and they were interested in the charismatic movement, and there would be choruses and all that kind of stuff. And it was actually pretty groundbreaking at the time because it was ecumenical. And in the 70s, people in denominations kept to themselves. And so they had all these people from all these different denominations. They even had Catholic nuns who came in habits. It was very cool. So my parents spearhead a lot of churchy stuff around town, and as a consequence, lots of people knew of them. They're both passed away now, and know of me too. So my mom and dad had two different parenting philosophies that did not serve their children very well. And when they were older, both parents admitted that they wished they had done things much differently because they could see how it didn't help the kids very much. So their first idea was that children should just enjoy their childhood. Children should have no responsibility and just do whatever they want to do, which was fun. It was fun. I had a childhood full of friends and fun. We never had to do any chores, partly because my mom had a cleaning lady, so that was taken care of. But because of that, I never learned how to work hard at physical things. And I still, to this day, am a lackluster housekeeper. And so I just want to encourage you, for those who have children, that if you don't teach them how to work, it's a real disservice to them. It's a real disservice to them. When I went to see a psychiatrist as an adult because of some postpartum depression I had, she asked me about my childhood, and I said, my childhood was not the problem. My childhood was like la la land. It's adulthood that I'm finding difficult. I was shocked after we had our first baby to find, unlike all the books and movies I had seen where women holding babies, it was like unending bliss and happiness. Well, spoiler alert, if you haven't had kids, it's not all bliss and happiness. And like I said, my childhood just didn't prepare me for difficult things in my childhood. I read this quote in Reader's Digest, so it must be true, that said, a childhood without grief or pain is a recipe for an unhappy adulthood. And I would say that was true. I had very little grief or pain in my childhood, and it did not serve me well. But it was their second parenting philosophy that was the most damaging. I was never yelled at. Instead, if we did not do as my parents wanted, they told us they were disappointed in us. And then they just stonewalled us emotionally until we acquiesced. Now, I got to tell you, it's a very effective parenting technique if you're looking for one. It can be emotionally damaging for life, but hey, it works. Now, I want to make it absolutely clear that I do not blame my parents for the way they parented me. They did their very best. They did. And they parented with the understanding of the day, and they're really quite thoughtful in the way they parented. And they did, like I said, what they thought was best for us. They, because they were by far the youngest children in their families, had essentially grown up with very little supervision or responsibility, and they're just used to doing whatever they wanted. And so when it came to adulthood, we children just kind of got in the way of them doing what they wanted to do. Our family just lived really separate lives from one another. Our house was big. It was intended to be that way. There was like 4 bedrooms and a playroom downstairs where our children were supposed to stay, and then my parents were upstairs, and like it was intentional like that. I had a materially privileged childhood, although I didn't realize it at the time. My childhood just seemed regular to me. Sure, we lived in a huge house and went to Europe on holidays and went skiing in the winter and had a cabin at the beach in the summers, but who doesn't? And actually, I had a friend over a couple years ago, and she was looking all the paintings up in the living room, and she asked me, "Oh, what's that one?" And I said, "Oh, that's a portrait my parents had done of me when I was 9." And she just started laughing. She's like, "How could you have not known you were rich when you're getting portraits painted of you?" I don't know. Just seemed regular to me. But what I didn't know was that I had emotionally underprivileged childhood. And again, this is not a criticism of my parents. They did their best, just like every other parent I've ever talked to. They just didn't understand how their behavior affected their children. One of the things that confirmed this to me was some very clear memories I have as a child of what should have been inconsequential moments. One time when I was walking to school, when I was around 8 years old, I fell and skinned my knee on the road really badly. And it happened to be in front of the house of a schoolmate of mine. And so the mom came out and hugged me. And I remember that hug. Like, I was just thinking, like, wow, this is great. Yeah. And then another time, I had been visiting a friend's house, and the parents dropped me off at home, and it was quite late at night. And I remember the dad saying, "Oh, Pamela looks like she's asleep. I guess I'll have to carry her in." And I thought, yeah. So I pretended to be asleep. So he would carry me into the house. And I loved that. I have another memory of being hugged at camp by a really big woman when I was 14. It was great. She was so soft and warm. My parents were always skinny. And but those are not events that should be consequential in your life, right? But the fact that I have such strong memories of people showing affection towards me made me think maybe something's not right here. I think part of my parents' philosophy was, and it certainly was, my mom was British, was you don't be too nice to your children or they'll grow up to be wussy, right? I think the opposite is true. If you grow up without much love or affection, you end up emotionally weaker. Yeah. If I have one little bit of advice for for parents with their children, it would be to spend time and enjoy your children. If your children sense that you enjoy them, they'll understand that they are worthwhile human beings. So one of the effects of this lack of attention made me very susceptible to attention I received from boys or men that I started to get when I was around 14. Now, just for fun, for the sake of this talk, I tried to make a list in my head of all the guys I had dated before I got married at age 24. Most of them were not long-term relationships. They were kind of puppy love, and they lasted like for 3 or 4 months or something like that. Well, I stopped counting when I got to 15 boyfriends, and it was fun. I was good at it. It was a sport I was good at. I wasn't as good at any other sports. But I should tell you that the ironic thing is that it was 10 years between 14 and 24. I actually dated one person in there for 5 years, so those 15 other people were condensed. I've always believed in God. At least I don't remember not believing in God. I think I told you I made a profession of faith when I was 9 years old at Sylvan Acres Baptist Camp, because the leaders told us we'd go to hell if we didn't say their magic words. So I thought, hey, I don't want to go to hell. So I said the magic words, but it wasn't a real heartfelt commitment. But when I was 14, I made a real decision to follow Jesus in my life. And I was baptized at Emmanuel Baptist Church by Norman Archer when I was 14. But I was also 14 and needed some way to rebel against my parents. So here's what I did. My parents didn't pay much attention to what we said unless we talked about spiritual things. Then my parents paid rapt attention if we did that. But I wanted to be loved for who I was, not just because I was sort of fulfilling their agenda for my life. And so how I rebelled was I never told them or showed them how strong my faith was. I hid from them my very strong faith in God as a way of rebelling against them. That's good, eh? Oh, and the other thing I did was my dad was very musical, played the piano really well, and when I practiced my viola, I'd play just slightly off tune because I knew that he would be like, oh, but he couldn't say anything because I was practicing. pretty good, Roddy, eh? Do you know what else I did? I put the candles in the wrong order today, just to be rebellious. I'm such a rebel. Okay. The only other thing of significance I can think of in my childhood was that we spent a year in the Amazon rainforest with Wycliffe Bible translators, and we were right in the rainforest. It was really cool. But it was the first time in my life I'd seen like the kind of grinding poverty that people in developing nations experience. And it changed me. I just came to understand that the opulence with which we live here, and we do, the opulence and wealth that we have here is not because we're smarter than people in developing nations. It's not like God likes us better. It's an accident of geography. And if we had been born in a jungle tribe, we would be exactly the same as them. And that was great because it changed my perspective on material things for the rest of my life, and hopefully made me a little bit less materialistic than I would have otherwise. Can I tell about the car? The car. We bought a new car a little while ago, and it's a red Mercedes, and it looks fancy. And I was mortified. And Paul said to me, it's pride. I'm like, why is it pride that I'm embarrassed that we have a car that looks nice? And he said, because you want people to think you're not materialistic, and they see that car and they'll think that you are. And I said, okay, but it only cost $8,000. So how about if we just put a little sign in the back? This car cost $8,000. Would you? And I'm like, I'd feel good then, but he's like, no, we're not doing that. You have to work on your pride. From the ages of 21 to 27, I had quite a number of challenging, significant life events. When I was 21, I started teaching at Pacific Christian School. When I was 22, I developed migraines that are still going. Oh, and I also broke up with that guy of 5 years when I was 21. When I was 23, I had a man kick in the door of the apartment that I lived in, presumably to rob me, I guess. My roommate was away. So I confronted him in the middle of the night, and he ran away. I still have some sort of PTSD from that. I've always had a hard time staying overnight by myself since then. I met, when I was 23, I also met my future and current husband, Paul, on a blind date set up by a colleague, and he used to drive race cars in Vancouver, and so I went to see him drive race cars. 3 months after we started dating, I was at Paul's house. He lived in Vancouver, I lived in Victoria, and we were going to go on holiday with some friends. So Paul's at work. So I had a few things that wouldn't fit in my suitcase, and he had like his backpack there. And I thought, oh, I wonder if he's got room in his. I'll just put my rain jacket or whatever it was in his thing. So I opened it up, and there was a little box in it. And I thought, I know what that is. When I was in grade 10, I took outdoor education, and everybody had to make a little box that you put in your pocket when you hiked, and it had like fishing line and hooks, a dime for the phone, waterproof matches, tinfoil to signal the planes looking for you. So I opened it up, and it was a ring, and I thought, how's a ring gonna help him if he's lost in the woods? And then I thought, wait a second, this is an engagement ring. And so he didn't ask me. We went away with our friends that weekend. He did not ask me. That whole weekend, I kept arranging like a quiet walk down the beach, sitting by the fire by ourselves at night. Nothing. It was not till a week later he asked me. I'm like, finally. And I couldn't tell anybody that I'd found the ring. And that, if you know me, you know how hard that was for me. Anyway, and then we got married 6 months after we met. Do not try this at home, kids. It is not a wise idea. At age 26, I got pregnant for the first time, but the little boy was stillborn at 6 months, and so that was obviously hard. It was the first time I'd ever had anyone close to me die. At age 20, that was when I was 25. When I was 26, no, I can't remember how old I was. Anyway, whatever. I got pregnant again like 4 months later. And so we had our oldest son, Ephraim, when he was born a month early and his lungs were immature. And so he had to be put in special care and intubated and all that kind of stuff. And it freaked me out because my baby had died the year before. And so I went into a postpartum depression after he was born. But I didn't tell anybody that I was not enjoying this. Because I just thought it was because I was a bad mother. I didn't tell my dad. My dad's a doctor. I didn't tell him because I just thought that it's just something wrong with me, that I'm a bad mother, that I don't like this. When that baby was 6 months old, I got pregnant again. We finally figured out birth control on about our third kid. Anyway, I got pregnant again when he was 6 months old, and that meant I had to go through the whole morning sickness thing again for the third time in 3 years. And so the boys were born about 15 months apart. Don't try this at home either. It's hard. And when I was pregnant with that third kid, my amniotic sac ruptured at 6 months. So then I was put on bed rest for 3 months, of the last 3 months of my pregnancy. That's a lot of difficult things in 6 years to happen to one person. And when our first grandson was born a couple years ago, I was telling everybody, this is so great, because I'm just enjoying him, because I didn't enjoy our own babies that much, because I was so overwhelmed, But you know what? I was thinking about all these things recently, all these difficult things that happened to me in that period of 6 years. And I thought to myself, wait a second, maybe I coped pretty frickin' well. And maybe I could be proud of myself for doing that. I told you I'm a rebel for believing in myself and all that. As I mentioned, I've always been interested in my spirituality, but at age 30, I started getting really irritated with God because I had such strong feelings for my husband, but I had no feelings, well, only negative feelings for God, right? I saw God as a man. I only had negative feelings. And I just thought to myself, God, how hard would this be for you to give me some actual feelings for God, positive feelings for God? So I started doing things like I thought, you get taught in Sunday school, read your Bible, pray every day, pray. You know that one? Okay, I did that for a year. Nothing. Did all those things for a year. And so then I started looking for a spiritual mentor, and I actually went to our pastor of the church that we were at right at that time, and I said, I'm looking for a spiritual mentor. And he said, oh, perfect. I'll talk to my wife. You guys can get together and talk about child rearing and recipes. Yeah. I'm like, huh. Anyway, I went to this thing called Cursillo, which is kind of like a Catholic, I don't know, it's a weekend, a spiritual weekend that Catholics put on. Through God's great providence, I met a woman there. Like, I'd sat at her table, like we sat at the table after every talk and had little chats and stuff. And I was really drawn to her. And at the end of the weekend, I said to her, would you be my spiritual mentor? And she looked at me and said, why are you asking me that? I said, not really clear. I said, I'm impulsive, but I'm not usually that bad. But she said, actually, I've had 20 years of training to be a spiritual mentor. I didn't even know that existed. I didn't know in the Catholic tradition it's called spiritual direction. Maybe some of you have heard of it. I didn't even know that existed as an evangelical, the way I was brought up. And so she saw me every week for 13 years and was transformative in my life. And I have to say to you that for me, spiritual mentoring or spiritual direction has been the single most powerful spiritual practice in my life. So, she helped me introduce me to the mystical side of Christianity, and that is people who are mystics are sort of more interested in actual experiences with God than with theology. And for instance, let me give you an example of like a little encounter that I had with Jesus. So I was praying one day, and she'd given me the scripture thing where Jesus welcomes the children to come and talk to him. So I'm praying this, and I'm doing the Ignatius prayer, and so I'm imagining myself in the scene, and I'm a child there with my mom. And I say to my mom, "Mom, I want to go and talk to Jesus." And she says, "Oh, Pamela, don't bother him. There's lots of other children here who have a lot more serious things going on in their lives than you do. You don't need to go and talk to Jesus." But then Jesus looked at me and went, "Lord." So I did. I went up, and then I got up there, and Jesus said, "What do you want to talk about?" I'm like, "I don't know. No adult had ever asked me that." I said, "I just want to sit on your lap while you talk to other people." So I did. I just sat there on Jesus' lap and felt loved and watched him interact with other people. So that's an example for me of a mystical experience where you have an actual encounter with God. Now, did I make that up in my head? Maybe. I don't know. But it was great. So I think I still lean that way. I'm far more interested in orthopraxy than orthodoxy. I don't really care what your theological position is on the rapture if you're a jerk. I'm far more interested in living my life with some compassion and grace than debating issues like whether the rapture will happen before or after a period of spiritual tribulation. I'm just not interested. So when people ask me, "What's your opinion on this?" I'm like, don't know. I've gone to a spiritual director for 30 years now, and like I said, I can easily say that it's most significant spiritual practice for me I've ever had in my life. And a spiritual director is somebody who helps you look at the everyday events of your life and figure out all the ways that God might be inviting you, calling you to live a better life. A life filled with, and you've heard me say this millions of times, a life filled with more love and peace and freedom and joy. Okay, that's it. I'm going to stop. I've gone on far too long, and I haven't even got to the point where armed robbers came to our house. Well, that's a story for another day. I know, that's a good one, eh? Were they Hell's Angels? How did you know? They came back to claim me. Okay. So here's some wisdom that I've gathered in my life so far. First off, suffering happens. You don't have to go out of your way looking for it. Suffering happens. And but the good part about suffering is summarized in this quote from Richard Rohr. Deep communion and dear compassion are formed much more by shared pain than shared pleasure. I do not know why this is true. We are not saved by any formulas or theologies or any priesthood extraneous to the human journey itself. Jesus said to Peter, "You must be ground like wheat. And once you have recovered, then you can turn and help your brothers and sisters." That's from Luke 22. My second piece of advice is find a spiritual practice that you like and keep at it. It works eventually. And you might get to know what a cool guy Jesus is. I still don't like God that much, but I really like Jesus. And lastly, be a rebel with a cause. Learn to believe in yourself. Amen.